Hello and welcome to our research summary on our study looking at trigger pull and marksmanship. For this study, we took 10 experienced law enforcement athletes, and we wanted to look at the effect of trigger pull resistance on non-stressed and stressed tactical marksmanship at 3 distances. So to do this, we divided our 10 athletes into 2 groups and had them do 2 marksmanship trials. Group 1 used their stock triggers for trial 1 and trial 2. Group 2 used their stock triggers for trial 1, and then we switched out their triggers to these lighter hyperfire triggers for trial 2. And both groups did 3 distances and 2 trial types, stressed and non-stressed, and then we compared the changes in performance between trial 1 and trial 2. So group 1 was our control group, and group 2 was our study group. So we compared those differences between the 2 groups. You'll see a video here that kind of shows you what it looks like in real time. So this was our 15-yard stress trial coming up. You can see athletes did a 15-yard shuttle in full gear. They pick up their weapon, and then they had to fire 6 rounds, 3 at a left target and 3 at a right target, and then we scored them based on that. So this was the stress we applied physiologically with the sprint. We had them on a time interval, so they had a certain amount of time, and they only had 6 rounds. This is a 100-yard trial, so a little bit different. They're still going to do 2 15-yard shuttles in full gear, but they're allowed to kneel. Same thing, 3 in your left, 3 at the right target, and we scored them. This was our stress for non-stress. The athletes simply picked up their weapons off the table. There was no time constraint. They got to fire 6 rounds at whatever time they wanted, 3 at a left target, 3 at a right target. You can see what those targets look like in the background of the slides or on the first slide and how we scored them. That's basically how we did these trials. Let's look at the results now. So at 15 yards, we found very little difference between the stock triggers and the light trigger group. You can see here, actually at 15 yards, it was a little bit better to use the stock triggers, but not a whole lot of difference. You can see the scores there on the left, the table on the right, the graph. Blue is always going to be stock triggers, and then green is going to be the lighter triggers. Nothing on this slide was too surprising for us. We kind of expected it, and really the differences were so small, there was no significant statistically here. Moving on to 50 yards, this is what we thought. We thought we would see more difference at the longer distances than we did here. You can see stock triggers much lower performing in the blue, and then the light triggers in the green there significantly outperformed them. 30% improvement on the non-stressed and about a 4% on the stressed, vice the stock trigger guys actually decreased performance at 50 yards. And this is what we thought. We thought we would see more improvement to longer distances. So this kind of supported our hypothesis that these lighter triggers may be good for tactical marksmanship at longer distances. Now moving on to 100 yards, things got a little funky here, and I think that was just a result of really noisy data that we got. I mean, these 100-yard trials were difficult, and you can see there, group 1, the stock trigger group, just performed pretty poorly on the initial trial and then non-stressed. And so they improved about 50% from trial 1 to trial 2, but we think that was just a result of them doing so poorly that first time. So these results kind of skewed a little bit of what we were looking at and really just like added a whole lot of noise to our data. You can see on the other side the light triggers, so it showed pretty consistent improvement for non-stressed and stressed. So this data, like I was saying before, it kind of threw us off a little bit. We'll talk about a little bit more why that is, but moving on. So across all distances and all athletes, you can see our 10 athletes down there at the bottom. All I did for this slide was take all the changes in performance and throw them onto one slide. We did have to drop one athlete number 1 there in the stock trigger group, because he failed to complete one of the trials. But what this slide really shows is that the blue stock trigger group, we had 2 athletes get better and 2 athletes get worse. And then on the light trigger group on the right there in the green, you see that we had 4 out of 5 athletes improve from trial 1 to trial 2. So that means that adding these light triggers was pretty consistent way to improve for our athletes, vice on the left where they were all over the place. And then this is our last results slide here. I just took those 3 distances slides before, threw them into one graph so you can see them side by side. Like I said before, the stock trigger group was a little bit better at 15 yards, no surprise there. And then that strange 100-yard stressed or non-stressed trial that we kind of need to throw out, I think. But then at 50 yards, we saw the light triggers actually really outperformed the stock triggers, and then at that 100-yard stress trial, same thing. Light triggers seem to be a little bit better. So this, I think, shows that support for a hypothesis that light triggers, may actually help performance at longer distances. So based off those findings, we think first we need to do a little bit more research here. A little bit inconclusive with that random 100-yard trial, but at a cost of $100 and less than 5 minutes to install, these lighter resistance triggers, may actually be pretty good option for increasing marksmanship at greater distances. The big takeaway for us on this study was that these athletes were pretty large and varied and inconsistent, and I think that gets down to the unfortunate thing that these athletes deal with as part-time SWAT team members. They only have about 1 to 2 days a month to train, and we think they just need more time training to be more consistent. So that would help us out data-wise and help them out performance-wise. Just a couple things I want to point out. We are dedicated to mission direct research, so that means we accept a little bit of risk on the side of pure academic research, but we think that this helps us be more applicable to the real world and kind of more technically and tactically proficient. So one of the things you can see from that video, athletes got to use their own weapons. We didn't standardize anything. Some guys were using iron sights, some guys were using red dots. So a lot of variation there, but that's the way it would be in a real situation. I've been over this before. Marksmanship trials, we use 3 distances, we use 2 targets, and we use stress and non-stress. All those things we think are really, really applicable to the real world. They do add a little bit of confounding variables in there, but they are what I think we need to make this real world applicable to you athletes out there. Limitations, obviously, small sample size. We had 10 athletes, 5 in each group. That means that statistically our threshold is really high for significance, and then large variability. You can see down there, at 50 yards scores range from 17 to 67 points, and then at 100 yards we had athletes scoring as low as 3 points all the way up to 56 points. So just a huge variation in how proficient these guys were, and that just hurt our data a little bit, made it super noisy. And then the time frame. We switched out these triggers. It took us about 5 minutes to switch them out, and then we gave the athletes only 30 rounds to get familiar with it. So had we given them more time, it probably would have made a better effect. So they were still kind of learning the triggers as they were doing the study. And that's just, a limitation of the time we had to work with them. Based on what we saw, we've got a bunch of recommendations here. Like any good study, I think we came out of it with, more questions and answers. But, one, we want to do this again with hopefully more athletes, bigger sample size, and then more consistent marksmen. We also really want to look at optics. That iron sight versus red dot, big impact. We didn't collect data on this, but just kind of looking at it anecdotally seems to make a difference. And this may be another way for athletes to cheaply and efficiently affect better marksmen. We think that training time is going to be huge. I mentioned this before. So we want to figure out a good way to effectively and efficiently do training with these units. We understand they have other things that they're working on. So, maybe dry fire, simulated range stress. What can we do to help these guys out, understand the confines they work in? We want to look at trigger pull resistance and handguns. This was just looking at the ARs. Let's see what it does with handguns. And then also, safety. So the biggest complaint people have with light trigger pulls is the safety thing. And we found some great stuff on drop test, and even the company that we used had some really good validating stuff that their triggers are safe and that kind of thing. Now we just want to combine those two. So let's look at safety and accuracy and see if we can come up with a good guideline. There was no guideline that we found for LE or really the military outside of one study we found with the Army. So let's do a study and look at that to help these guys out. So moving on, let's just thank these guys. The Fresno Police Department, they were awesome. The SWAT team guys, super professional. Great operators, great to work with, so thanks to those guys. We got to do this at their regional training center, which you can see in the video and the pictures. Amazing place, amazing video, so thanks for that. And then the company Hyperfire, they're the ones that gave us the triggers that we used. They worked out great, they're easy to install, so thanks to them for helping us out. Here's a list of our references. If you want more details on the study, we've got a full white paper that you can go through and kind of dig in and geek out on the data. But that's kind of the basic rundown of what we did. So thanks for stopping by.